For over 4,000 years, this story was buried in the sands of Iraq. Cuneiform tablets that archaeologists dismissed as mythology actually contain humanity's most explosive secret. The Anunnaki weren't legends, they were the puppet masters who shaped every civilization that followed. Welcome to Ancient Echoes. Today we dive into the Anunnaki story, the greatest mystery in human history. This isn't just a tale about ancient Mesopotamian gods. This is the story of the truth about who you are, who I am, who we all are. Our story begins in 1849, when a young British archaeologist named Austin Henry Ladd was excavating the ancient city of Nineveh in northern Iraq. When Ladd discovered the ruins of King Ashurbanipal's palace library, he found thousands of clay tablets. These tablets had been buried for 2,600 years, waiting for someone who could unlock their secrets. But Ladd couldn't read cuneiform script. Neither could anyone else in the Western world at that time. These tablets would sit in the British Museum for decades before scholars finally cracked the code of humanity's first written language. The man who would change everything was George Smith, a banknote engraver turned Assyriologist. In 1872, Smith was studying tablet number K3375 when he made a discovery that would shake the foundations of human history. The tablet contained a flood story remarkably similar to the biblical account of Noah, but this version was written over 1,000 years before the Old Testament. Smith was so excited by his discovery that he reportedly began running around the room, tearing off his clothes in excitement. He had no idea that this was just the beginning. The tablet he'd translated was just one piece of a much larger puzzle, a puzzle that would reveal the true origins of human civilization. As more tablets were translated over the following decades, a picture began to emerge that challenged everything Western civilization believed about its origin. These weren't just stories about gods and heroes. They were detailed historical records of beings who claimed to have created humanity itself. The tablets spoke of the Anunnaki, literally meaning those who from heaven to earth came. According to these ancient records, they were not gods in the supernatural sense, but advanced beings from another world who had arrived on Earth hundreds of thousands of years ago. To understand the Anunnaki, we must first understand the Sumerians, the people who first recorded their story. Sumerian civilization appeared seemingly overnight around 300–500 BCE in the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in what is now southern Iraq. The sudden emergence of Sumerian civilization has long puzzled historians. Within a few centuries, the Sumerians had developed the world's first cities, the first written language, the first schools, the first legal codes, and the first organized government. They invented the wheel, the sailboat, and the plow. They developed mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. This wasn't a gradual development over thousands of years. It was an explosion of knowledge and technology that appeared to come from nowhere. Traditional archaeology attributes this to natural human innovation, but the Sumerian tablets themselves tell a very different story. According to these records, all of this knowledge was given to humanity by the Anunnaki. The Sumerians claimed they were taught agriculture, metallurgy, astronomy, mathematics, and writing by beings who descended from the sky in flying vehicles they called divine boats, or sky chambers. The Sumerian king list, one of the most important historical documents from ancient Mesopotamia, begins with these words. After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. In Eridu, Alulim became king. He ruled for 28,800 years for a single reign. Traditional historians dismiss this as mythological exaggeration, but what if it's not? What if these numbers reflect the actual lifespans of the Anunnaki rulers? The king list goes on to describe 8 kings who ruled for a combined total of 200 years before the flood swept over the earth. After the flood, it says, the kingship was lowered again from heaven, but the reigns became much shorter, though still lasting hundreds or thousands of years. This pattern is consistent throughout Mesopotamian records. Extremely long reigns for the earliest rulers, gradually decreasing to more human-like lifespans over time. This could represent the gradual interbreeding of the Anunnaki with humanity, diluting their longevity with each generation. The Mesopotamian tablets describe a complex hierarchy of Anunnaki beings, each with specific roles and responsibilities. At the top of this hierarchy was Anu, the sky god and supreme ruler of the Anunnaki. Anu ruled from the planet Nibiru, which the tablets describe as the Anunnaki homeworld. Below Anu were his two sons, Enlil and Enki. These two brothers would play central roles in the Anunnaki story, often serving as rivals in a cosmic drama that would shape the destiny of humanity. Enlil, whose name means Lord of the Air, was given authority over Earth's atmosphere and weather. He was described as stern and sometimes cruel, viewing humanity as a necessary evil at best. Enlil controlled the winds and storms, and the tablets credit him with bringing the Great Flood that nearly destroyed humanity. Enki, also known as Ea, was lord of the earth and waters. He was portrayed as more benevolent toward humanity, often serving as our protector against his brother's harsher judgments. Enki was said to be the geneticist who created modern humans, and he was the one who warned the flood hero about the coming deluge. Other important Anunnaki included Ninhursag, the mother goddess who assisted in humanity's creation; Ananna, goddess of love and war; Marduk, Enki's son who would eventually become king of the gods; and Thoth, keeper of divine knowledge and wisdom. Each Anunnaki was assigned a numerical rank reflecting their importance in the hierarchy. Anu held rank 60, Enlil held rank 50, and Enki held rank 40. These numbers weren't arbitrary. They corresponded to mathematical and astronomical principles that governed Anunnaki society. The tablets describe how 600 Anunnaki came to Earth, with 300 remaining in orbit around the planet while 300 descended to the surface. Those who came to Earth were called the Igigi, and they were tasked with mining gold and other precious materials needed by their civilization. According to the Mesopotamian accounts, the Anunnaki first arrived on Earth approximately 445,000 years ago. Their home planet, Nibiru, was facing an atmospheric crisis that threatened their civilization. The solution was gold, dispersed in their atmosphere. Gold particles could serve as a protective shield against harmful radiation. Earth was rich in gold, particularly in the Abzu, the deep mines of southeastern Africa. The Anunnaki established their first settlement at Eridu, in southern Mesopotamia, which would serve as their mission control center. From there they organized mining operations that stretched from the Middle East to Africa. The work was grueling, even for the technologically advanced Anunnaki. For thousands of years, the Igigi labored in the mines, extracting the precious metal that would save their homeworld. But eventually they rebelled against their harsh working conditions. The Atrahasis epic, one of the most complete Anunnaki texts we possess, describes this rebellion in detail. The Igigi had been working for 40 periods of 3,600 years, a total of 44,000 years, when they finally decided they'd had enough. When the gods, like men, bore the work and suffered the toil. The text begins, "The toil of the gods was great, the work was heavy, the distress was much." The rebellion forced the Anunnaki leadership to find a solution. They couldn't continue mining operations without workers, but they also couldn't force their own people to continue the back-breaking labor. The solution they devised would change the course of life on Earth forever. The decision to create a primitive worker, the Adam-Ni, was made in the Council of the Gods. According to the tablets, Enki and his half-sister Ninhursag were tasked with this genetic engineering project. "You have cried mutiny. What are we accusing them of?" Enki asked the assembly. Their work was indeed too hard. Their trouble was too much. Every day the earth resounded with the complaint. "We are hearing the outcry." The solution was to create a hybrid being, part Anunnaki, part primitive hominid. The tablets describe this process in remarkable detail, using terminology that sounds surprisingly similar to modern genetic engineering. The Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, describes how Marduk defeated Tiamat and used her body to create the heavens and the earth. But hidden within this mythological language may be a description of actual genetic manipulation. "I will create a primitive worker," Enki declared. "He shall bear the yoke, he shall carry the toil of the god." The tablets describe how Enki and Ninhursag took clay from the earth, possibly referring to the basic genetic material of early hominids, and mixed it with the divine essence of the Anunnaki. This essence was specifically described as coming from the blood of a sacrificed Anunnaki named Geshtu. Modern interpretation suggests this clay and divine essence might refer to DNA manipulation, where Anunnaki genetic material was combined with that of Homo erectus or early Homo sapiens to create a new species, us. The process wasn't perfect at first. The tablets describe numerous failed attempts, creating beings who were sterile, deformed, or otherwise unsuitable for the intended purpose. But eventually, Enki and Ninhursag succeeded in creating viable hybrid beings. These first humans were called the Adamni, literally meaning those of the earth. They were created in the image of their makers, but they were designed to be subservient workers who could take over the mining operation. The newly created humans needed a place to live and be cared for while they developed. The tablets describe how the Anunnaki established a settlement called Aden, which meant flat land or steppe in Sumerian. This Aden was not a mystical paradise, but a practical agricultural and breeding facility where the first humans were housed, fed, and put to work. It was located in Mesopotamia, between the rivers, where the climate was suitable for both agriculture and human habitation. The biblical Garden of Eden clearly derives from these Mesopotamian accounts, but the original story was quite different from the version that appears in Genesis. In the Sumerian version, humans were created specifically to work, and the garden was more like a plantation or work camp. The tablets describe how the early humans were initially naked and unaware. They had been designed to be docile workers who would follow orders without question. They were given enough intelligence to perform their tasks, but not enough to question their creators or their purpose. But something went wrong with this plan. According to the Epic of Gilgamesh and other texts, some humans began to develop greater intelligence and awareness. This wasn't part of the original design, and it created conflict among the Anunnaki leadership. Enlil, always suspicious of humanity, saw this development as a threat. He believed that intelligent humans would eventually challenge Anunnaki authority and should be controlled or eliminated. Enki, who had been instrumental in human creation, argued that this evolution was natural and should be allowed to continue. This philosophical split between the two brothers would define much of subsequent human history. Enlil represented the faction that wanted to keep humanity subservient and controlled, while Enki advocated for human development and eventual independence. The tablets describe a critical moment when humans gained access to the Tree of Knowledge, which may represent advanced scientific or technological information that was supposed to be restricted to the Anunnaki. When Enlil discovered this breach, he was furious. "The humans have become like one of us," Enlil reportedly declared, "knowing good and evil. Now they must not be allowed to reach out their hand and take from the tree of life and eat and live forever." This tree of life appears to represent longevity technology, or genetic modifications that would have given humans lifespans comparable to the Anunnaki. Enlil's fear was that immortal, intelligent humans would pose a direct threat to Anunnaki dominance. Despite Enlil's concerns, human civilization continued to develop under Anunnaki guidance. The tablets describe how different groups of humans were assigned to different Anunnaki leaders, who became their patron god. Cities were established throughout Mesopotamia, each under the protection and guidance of a specific Anunnaki. Eridu belonged to Enki, Nippur to Enlil, Uruk to Anu, and later Inanna, Babylon to Marduk. and so on. Each city had a ziggurat, a massive stepped pyramid that served as both a temple and a landing platform for Anunnaki aircraft. These ziggurats weren't just ceremonial structures, they were functional facilities designed to accommodate the divine boats and sky chambers that the Anunnaki used for transportation. The precise measurements and alignments of these structures suggest they were built according to advanced engineering principles. The tablets describe how the Anunnaki taught humans various crafts and technologies: agriculture, animal husbandry, metallurgy, astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and law. Each advance in human civilization was credited to divine instruction rather than natural human innovation. But this technological transfer came with strings attached. Humans were expected to provide food, labor, and worship to their Anunnaki masters. The entire early Mesopotamian economic system was designed to support the Anunnaki establishment, with humans serving as a managed workforce. The concept of kingship was introduced as a way to manage human populations more efficiently. According to the Sumerian king list, kingship was lowered from heaven, meaning it was an Anunnaki institution designed to govern humans on their behalf. Early kings were often described as being of mixed Anunnaki human ancestry, giving them both the authority of divine blood and the ability to communicate with both races. These hybrid rulers served as intermediaries between the gods and common humans. As human civilization developed, interactions between Anunnaki and humans became more complex. The tablets, as well as biblical texts, describe how some Anunnaki began taking human women as wives and producing hybrid offspring. The Book of Genesis briefly mentions this phenomenon. The sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. The Book of Enoch, though not included in the standard biblical canon, provides much more detail about these unions. It describes how 200 watchers, clearly corresponding to the Anunnaki, descended to earth and took human wives, teaching them forbidden knowledge in the process. These hybrid beings, known as the Nephilim, were described as giants with extraordinary abilities. They were stronger, more intelligent, and longer lived than ordinary humans, but they were also prone to violence and excess. Their presence began to corrupt human civilization and create instability. The Mesopotamian tablets provide even more detail about these hybrid bloodlines. They describe how certain human families carried Anunnaki genes, which gave them special abilities and longer lifespan. These bloodlines became the ruling dynasties of early civilization, tracing their authority back to divine ancestry. But not all Anunnaki approved of these mixed relationships. Enlil, in particular, viewed the hybridization as a contamination of both species. He argued that these powerful half-breeds would eventually pose a threat to Anunnaki authority and needed to be eliminated. The tablets describe increasing conflict between pure humans, Anunnaki human hybrids, and the Anunnaki themselves. This three-way struggle for power and resources would ultimately lead to the most catastrophic event in early human history. As the Nephilim multiplied and gained influence, human civilization began to change in ways that alarmed some Anunnaki leaders. The tablets describe a period of increasing violence, moral corruption, and technological misuse that threatened the stability of the entire experiment. The hybrid beings, with their superior strength and intelligence, began to dominate human society. They established themselves as rulers and demanded tribute and worship from ordinary humans. Some became tyrants who used their power to exploit and oppress their subjects. More troubling was the spread of forbidden knowledge. The Anunnaki had shared certain technologies with humans to help them fulfill their roles as workers and servants. But some of this knowledge was being used for purposes never intended by the original teachers. The Book of Enoch describes how the fallen watchers taught humans the secrets of heaven, metallurgy for making weapons, cosmetics and jewelry for vanity, astrology and divination for predicting the future, and even abortion and contraception for controlling reproduction. This technological proliferation had unintended consequences. Humans began using their new knowledge to wage war against each other with increasingly sophisticated weapons. They developed obsessions with material wealth and physical pleasure that distracted them from their assigned duty. Perhaps most seriously, some humans began to understand the true nature of their creators. They realized that the Anunnaki were not supernatural gods, but advanced beings who could be challenged or even overthrown. This knowledge threatened the entire system of control that had been established. The tablets describe how Enlil and his faction became increasingly convinced that the human experiment had been a failure. They argued that humanity had become too numerous, too independent, and too dangerous to be allowed to continue unchecked. The land extended and the peoples multiplied, one text records. The land was bellowing like a bull, and the great god was disturbed with the uproar. Enlil heard the clamor and said to the gods in council, "The uproar of mankind is intolerable, and sleep is no longer possible by reason of the babble." But Enlil's concerns went deeper than mere noise. He saw that humans were developing into a species that might eventually challenge the Anunnaki for dominance of Earth. Something drastic needed to be done to restore the natural order. The Council of the Anunnaki faced a critical decision. The human population had grown beyond their ability to control effectively. The hybrid Nephilim were creating instability and violence, and worst of all, humans were beginning to understand their true origins and purpose. Enlil proposed a final solution: the complete elimination of humanity through a natural disaster. He had the power to bring about such a catastrophe, and he argued that it was necessary to prevent an even greater disaster in the future. "Decide," Enlil told the council, "on the sinner his sin, on the transgressor his transgression. Let the faithful not perish with the faithless. Let the innocent not perish with the guilty." But Enki objected strenuously to his brother's plan. He argued that humanity deserved a chance to survive and evolve, even if they had strayed from their original purpose. The humans were, after all, partially Anunnaki in their genetic makeup. Destroying them would be tantamount to genocide against their own kind. The debate raged for some time, but eventually Enlil's faction prevailed. The decision was made to allow a great flood to destroy human civilization, wiping the slate clean, so that the experiment could begin again with a smaller, more controllable population. However, Enki was not willing to allow the complete extinction of humanity. In secret, he began to make plans to preserve at least some humans and the knowledge they had accumulated. This act of defiance against the Council's decision would have profound consequences for the future of both species. The tablets are very specific about the mechanism of the coming flood. It wasn't a supernatural event, but a natural disaster that Enlil had the power to trigger through his control of atmospheric and weather systems. Some interpretations suggest it involved the melting of ice caps, or the redirecting of ocean currents. Whatever the exact mechanism, the Anunnaki knew exactly when and where the disaster would strike. They made preparations to protect their own facilities and personnel, while leaving humanity completely unaware of the approaching catastrophe. All except for one human family, whom Enki secretly warned and helped to survive. This intervention would ensure that the human story would continue, even as the first phase of human civilization came to a catastrophic end. The stage was set for the greatest catastrophe in human history, an event so traumatic that it would be remembered in the flood stories of every culture on Earth. But it was also the beginning of humanity's journey toward eventual independence from their creator. While the Anunnaki Council prepared for humanity's destruction, Enki worked in secret to preserve what he considered his greatest creation. He couldn't openly defy the Council's decision without triggering a civil war among the Anunnaki, but he also couldn't stand by and watch the complete annihilation of the humans he had helped to create. Enki's plan was brilliant in its simplicity. He would warn one human family, descendants of the Anunnaki bloodline who had remained faithful and uncorrupted, and provide them with the knowledge and resources needed to survive the coming catastrophe. This would ensure genetic continuity, while technically not violating the Council's decree. The man Enki chose was known by several names in different traditions. Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh, Atrahasis in the Akkadian flood story, and later Noah in the biblical account. In all versions he is described as a righteous man who had found favor with the god. According to the tablets, Enki approached this chosen survivor in a dream, speaking to him through the wall of his reed house. To maintain plausible deniability, reed house, wall, wall, Enki called out, Atrahasis, pay heed to my advice, that you may live forever. The warning was specific and detailed. Enki told the flood hero exactly when the deluge would come, how it would be triggered, and what needed to be done to survive. More importantly, he provided technical specifications for building a survival vessel. Not just a simple boat, but a sophisticated ark, designed to weather the most catastrophic flood in Earth's history. The dimensions given in the tablets are precise: 120 cubits in length, width, and height. Essentially a cube measuring about 200 feet on each side. This wasn't designed for navigation, but for stability and survival in turbulent water. The vessel was to have 7 decks and multiple compartments, with specific areas designated for different types of cargo. But Enki's instructions went far beyond just building a boat. He told the chosen survivor to gather representatives of all Earth's species, not just animals but plants, seeds, and what the tablets describe as the crafts of civilization. This suggests that Enki wanted to preserve not just biological diversity, but human knowledge and technology as well. The flood hero was also instructed to bring aboard skilled craftsmen, artisans, and knowledgeable people who could help rebuild civilization after the waters receded. In essence, Enki was ensuring that the post-flood world would have access to the accumulated wisdom of the antediluvian age. The tablets describe the flood in terrifying detail, providing what may be the most accurate account of a global catastrophe in ancient literature. Unlike the biblical version, which attributes the flood to divine anger, the Mesopotamian accounts describe it as a carefully orchestrated natural disaster triggered by Anunnaki technology. For 6 days and 6 nights the wind blew, torrent and tempest and flood overwhelmed the world. The Epic of Gilgamesh records, when the 7th day dawned, the storm from the south subsided. The sea grew calm. The flood was still. But before the flood itself came a series of preliminary disasters designed to soften up human resistance and create maximum chaos. The tablets describe years of drought, famine, and disease that preceded the main event. These weren't random natural disasters, but calculated steps in Enlil's plan to weaken humanity before the final blow. The Atrahasis epic provides the most detailed timeline of events. It describes how Enlil first sent drought to reduce food supplies, then disease to weaken the population, and finally the flood to finish the job. Each phase was carefully calibrated to achieve maximum destruction while appearing to be natural occurrence. When the flood finally came, it was unlike anything the world had ever seen. The tablets describe the release of waters from above and below, suggesting both massive rainfall and the opening of underground water sources. Modern geological evidence suggests this could correspond to the end of the last ice age, when melting glaciers raised sea levels by hundreds of feet in a relatively short time. The Anunnaki themselves took refuge in their spacecraft, watching the destruction from orbit. The gods were frightened by the flood, the Epic of Gilgamesh tells us, and retreated, ascending to the heaven of Anu. The gods were cowering like dogs, crouching by the outer wall. This detail is particularly significant because it suggests the Anunnaki were not omnipotent beings who could control natural forces at will, but advanced beings who were themselves vulnerable to the catastrophic events they had set in motion. They had to flee to safety just like any other physical beings would. Even more telling is the description of their emotional response to the destruction. When Ninhursag arrived, she saw the jeweled flies. The text continues, referring to the lights of their aircraft. Ninhursag lifted the large flies which Anu had made for her. "You gods, as surely as I shall not forget this jewel upon my neck, May I be mindful of these days and never forget them. This passage suggests that even among the Anunnaki there was regret and horror at the scale of destruction they had caused. The jeweled flies may refer to their aircraft, and Ninhursag's vow suggests she wanted to ensure such a catastrophe would never happen again. While the world drowned around them, the flood hero and his carefully selected passengers rode out the catastrophe in their sophisticated survival vessel. The tablets provide remarkable details about life aboard the Ark during the flood, describing not just the physical challenges of survival, but the psychological and spiritual ordeal of witnessing the destruction of an entire world. The Ark wasn't just floating passively on the floodwaters. It was a complex survival system designed to sustain its passengers for an extended period. The tablets describe multiple decks, each with specific functions: living quarters, food storage, water recycling systems, and even areas designated for maintaining the various species of animals and plants. The psychological toll on the survivors was enormous. They could hear the cries of drowning humans and animals, see the destruction of everything they had known, and wonder if they would ever find dry land again. The flood hero is described as weeping as he watched his world disappear beneath the waters. But perhaps most significantly, the tablets describe how the survivors used their time in the Ark to preserve and organize human knowledge. They weren't just waiting for the flood to end. They were preparing for the massive task of rebuilding civilization from scratch. Enki had made sure the Ark contained not just biological samples, but representatives of every important human skill and profession. There were farmers who knew how to cultivate crops, metal workers who could forge tools and weapons, builders who could construct cities, scribes who could record and transmit knowledge, and priests who could maintain contact with the Anunnaki. The tablets also describe how the Ark contained extensive libraries, collections of tablets that preserved the history, laws, literature, and scientific knowledge of the antediluvian world. This suggests that Enki was planning not just for human survival, but for the continuation of human civilization at its previous level of sophistication. During the long months of the flood, the survivors organized themselves into a functioning community aboard the Ark. They developed new techniques for food preservation, water purification, and waste management. They created new forms of social organization that would serve them well in the post-flood world. Most importantly, they maintained their connection to Enki, who continued to provide guidance and support despite his official neutrality in the Council's decision. This relationship would prove crucial when the time came to rebuild civilization on the devastated Earth. After what the tablets describe as 150 days, the floodwaters began to recede, and the Ark came to rest on a mountain peak. The location is identified as Mount Nisir in some texts, Mount Ararat in others, both peaks in the mountains between modern-day Turkey and Armenia. The flood hero sent out birds to test whether it was safe to disembark. First a dove, then a swallow, and finally a raven. When the raven didn't return, he knew it had found dry land and food. This detail appears in flood stories from around the world, suggesting it may preserve an actual survival technique used by ancient mariners. But when the survivors finally left the Ark, they found a world utterly transformed. The great cities of the antediluvian age were gone, buried under layers of mud and debris. The sophisticated irrigation systems, temples and palaces that had supported millions of people were now archaeological sites, waiting to be discovered. Thousands of years later, the Anunnaki had returned to Earth, but they too faced a changed world. Many of their installations had been damaged or destroyed by the flood. Their human workforce was gone, their agricultural systems were ruined, and their carefully maintained civilization lay in ruin. Some of the Anunnaki expressed surprise at the survival of any humans at all. When Enlil discovered that the flood hero and his family had survived, he was initially furious, suspecting that someone had violated the council's decision. But when Enki's role was revealed, even Enlil had to admit that the preservation of at least some humans was probably necessary for the rebuilding effort. The tablets describe a tense confrontation between the brothers over this deception. Who else but Enki would do such a thing? Enlil demanded. It was Enki who told them the decision of the gods. But Enki defended his actions eloquently. I did not disclose the secret of the gods. The wise one had a dream, and the interpretation of the dream told him everything. Now then, take counsel with regard to him. This exchange reveals the complex politics among the Anunnaki leadership. While Enlil had the authority to order the flood, he couldn't simply punish Enki for ensuring some humans survived. The brothers needed to work together to rebuild their civilization, and that meant finding a new arrangement that would work for both Anunnaki and human interests. The post-flood world required new agreements between the Anunnaki and humanity. The old system of complete human subservience was no longer viable. There were simply too few humans left to support the Anunnaki in the manner to which they had become accustomed. A new relationship had to be negotiated. The tablets describe a ceremony where the flood hero and his family were granted what can only be described as semi-divine status. They were given extended lifespans, authority over other humans, and direct access to the Anunnaki leadership. In exchange, they agreed to serve as intermediaries between the gods and the human population that would grow from their descendants. This new covenant established several important principles that would govern Anunnaki-human relations for millennia to come. First, humans would be allowed to develop their own civilizations, but they would remain under ultimate Anunnaki authority. Second, regular tribute and worship would be required, but the burden would be shared more equitably among the population. Third, certain bloodlines, those descended from the flood survivors and earlier Anunnaki human hybrids, would be granted special status as ruling dynasties. The Anunnaki also made commitments. They promised never again to destroy humanity completely, symbolized by the rainbow that appears in the sky after the flood. They agreed to share more knowledge and technology with humans, enabling faster recovery and development. And they established new institutions for managing human affairs that would be less prone to the corruption and violence that had characterized the pre-flood world. But perhaps most significantly, the post-flood covenant recognized that humanity was no longer the same species that had been created as primitive workers. The flood survivors carried not just Anunnaki genes, but centuries of accumulated knowledge, experience, and cultural development. They were no longer naive servants, but junior partners in the management of Earth. This new arrangement wasn't entirely satisfactory to either side. Some Anunnaki felt it gave humans too much independence, while some humans chafed at continuing restrictions on their development. But it was a workable compromise that would allow both species to coexist and thrive in the recovering world. The task of rebuilding human civilization from a single family was enormous, but the survivors had several advantages that the original humans had lacked. They possessed advanced knowledge, they had direct and Anunnaki support, and they understood both the possibilities and the dangers of rapid technological development. The tablets describe how the first post-flood settlements were established in the foothills of the mountains where the Ark had landed. These early communities were small and simple, focused primarily on survival and population growth, but they carried within them the seeds of the great civilizations that would follow. Agriculture was re-established using techniques preserved from the antediluvian world, but adapted to the changed landscape. The flood survivors knew about irrigation, crop rotation, animal domestication, and selective breeding, knowledge that had taken their ancestors thousands of years to develop. This allowed post-flood communities to progress much more rapidly than would otherwise have been possible. Metallurgy was another crucial advantage. The survivors knew how to extract and work metals, how to create alloys, and how to manufacture tools and weapons. This technological knowledge, combined with Anunnaki guidance about where to find mineral deposits, gave the recovering civilization a significant head start. Perhaps most importantly, the survivors possessed writing, the ability to record and transmit knowledge across generations. This meant that hard-won lessons wouldn't be lost, that technical specifications could be preserved accurately, and that legal and social institutions could be documented and refined over time. The Anunnaki provided support for this rebuilding effort, but they were more selective about what knowledge they shared. They had learned from the pre-flood experience that giving humans too much technology, too quickly, could lead to unforeseen consequences. The new approach involved gradual technology transfer, carefully monitored to ensure it was used responsibly. Different Anunnaki took charge of different aspects of the recovery. Enki continued to oversee human genetic development and agricultural advancement, and managed weather patterns and natural resources. Nun-Her-Sag supervised population growth and health. Other Anunnaki became patron deities of specific cities and regions, as human population centers began to emerge. As human population recovered over the centuries following the flood, new cities and kingdoms began to emerge throughout the Middle East and beyond. But these weren't just random human settlements. They were carefully planned components of a renewed Anunnaki civilization on Earth. The tablets describe how specific locations were chosen for major cities based on their strategic importance, natural resources, and suitability for Anunnaki operations. Each city was assigned to a particular Anunnaki ruler, who became its patron deity and ultimate authority. Babylon became the greatest of these post-flood cities, eventually serving as the capital of Mesopotamian civilization under Anunnaki rule. The city was associated with Marduk, Enki's son, who gradually accumulated power and influence among the younger generation of Anunnaki leaders. The famous Tower of Babel, described briefly in biblical texts, but in much greater detail in Mesopotamian sources, was actually a massive ziggurat designed to serve as a launching platform and communication center for Anunnaki spacecraft. The confusion of languages that ended its construction may represent a deliberate Anunnaki policy to prevent humans from becoming too unified and potentially challenging their authority. Egypt developed along different lines, with its own group of Anunnaki rulers, who became known by different names in Egyptian mythology. Thoth, Ptah, Ra, and others established a parallel civilization along the Nile that would eventually rival Mesopotamia in sophistication and power. The Indus Valley Civilization, the early Chinese dynasties, and even the mysterious megalithic cultures of Europe and the Americas all show signs of Anunnaki influence during this period. The same architectural techniques, astronomical alignments, and mythological themes appear in widely separated cultures, suggesting coordinated development under Anunnaki guidance. But this global expansion also created new problems. Communication and control became more difficult as human populations spread across continents. Different groups of Anunnaki began developing their own regional policies, sometimes in conflict with the decisions of the Central Council. One of the most significant developments in post-flood Anunnaki politics was the rise of Marduk, Enki's ambitious son, to a position of supreme authority. This transition represented a generational change in Anunnaki leadership, with younger leaders taking control from the founders who had originally colonized Earth. Marduk had been assigned authority over Babylon, which under his guidance became the greatest city in the ancient world. But he wasn't content to be just another regional administrator. He wanted to reorganize the entire Anunnaki power structure with himself at the top. The Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, can be read as a political manifesto describing Marduk's rise to power. In mythological language, it describes how Marduk defeated the old gods and established a new order with himself as king of the universe. But the tablets make it clear that this wasn't a smooth transition. Marduk's rise to power involved conflict with other Anunnaki leaders, particularly those who had been in authority since the original colonization of Earth. Some texts describe actual warfare between different Anunnaki factions, with devastating consequences for human populations caught in the middle. The struggle culminated in what the tablets call the War of the Gods, a conflict that raged across the ancient world and involved the use of weapons that sound remarkably like modern nuclear devices. Cities were destroyed in an instant, leaving behind areas that remained uninhabitable for generations. The description of these weapons and their effects bears an uncanny resemblance to modern accounts of nuclear warfare. Eventually, Marduk emerged victorious and established himself as the supreme king of both gods and humans. This new arrangement represented a significant change in Anunnaki-human relations, as Marduk was more willing than his predecessors to share advanced technology and knowledge with human populations. Under Marduk's rule, human civilization reached new heights of achievement. The great empires of Babylon, Assyria, and Persia all reflected his influence and patronage. Advanced mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and engineering flourished under Anunnaki guidance. Despite the success of post-flood civilization, the Anunnaki gradually began to withdraw from direct involvement in human affairs. Several factors contributed to this decision, which would have profound implications for the future development of both species. First, the Anunnaki home planet Nibiru was moving away from Earth in its orbital cycle, making communication and travel more difficult. The tablets describe Nibiru as having an extremely elliptical orbit that brings it close to Earth only once every. As it moved away, maintaining an active presence on Earth became increasingly challenging. Second, human populations had grown large and sophisticated enough to manage most of their own affairs. The original purpose of the Anunnaki colonization, to obtain gold and other resources, was being fulfilled by human mining operations. The Anunnaki no longer needed to maintain large populations on Earth to achieve their objective. Third, the younger generation of Anunnaki, represented by figures like Marduk, were more interested in cosmic affairs than in the detailed management of human civilization. They preferred to establish general policies and let human leaders handle day-to-day administration. The process of withdrawal was gradual and carefully managed. Anunnaki rulers didn't simply disappear. Instead, they transferred authority to their human hybrid descendants, established institutional structures that could function independently, and created religious and cultural systems that would preserve essential knowledge and maintain social order. This transition is reflected in the mythologies of ancient civilizations, which describe how the gods gradually became more distant and less directly involved in human affairs. What these myths may actually be recording is the historical process by which humanity assumed greater responsibility for its own development. One of the most important aspects of the Anunnaki withdrawal was the establishment of hybrid bloodlines that would continue to provide leadership for human civilization. These families, descended from unions between Anunnaki and humans, carried genetic traits that made them longer-lived, more intelligent, and better able to understand and use advanced technology. The tablets describe how these bloodlines were carefully maintained and documented, with detailed genealogies preserved to ensure the purity of the lines. Marriage arrangements were made to strengthen beneficial traits and prevent the dilution of Anunnaki genetic contribution. These hybrid families became the royal dynasties of the ancient world. The pharaohs of Egypt, the kings of Mesopotamia, the emperors of China, and the rulers of other great civilizations all claimed descent from divine ancestors, claims that may have been literally accurate rather than merely mythological. The preservation of these bloodlines served several purposes. First, it ensured that human civilization would continue to have leaders capable of understanding and implementing Anunnaki technology and policies. Second, it provided a mechanism for continued Anunnaki influence even after their physical withdrawal from Earth. Third, it created a stable leadership structure that could maintain order and progress over long periods. But the existence of these hybrid bloodlines also created social tensions that persist to this day. The genetic advantages of the ruling families gave them genuine superiority in certain areas, which justified their political dominance. But this same superiority created resentment among ordinary humans, who were excluded from power despite their numerical advantage. The tablets suggest that this tension between hybrid elites and ordinary humans was intentional, a form of social control that would prevent either group from becoming too powerful or independent. By creating competing interests within human society, the Anunnaki ensured that humans would remain focused on internal conflicts rather than questioning their relationship with their creator. As the Anunnaki prepared for their withdrawal from active management of Earth, they faced a critical challenge: how to preserve essential knowledge and technology so that human civilization could continue to develop in their absence. The solution was the creation of secret schools and mystery traditions that would maintain and transmit advanced knowledge to qualified initiates. These institutions, operating under various names in different cultures, served as repositories of Anunnaki science and wisdom. The Egyptian mystery schools, centered around the worship of Thoth, preserved mathematical, astronomical, and medical knowledge that wouldn't be discovered by mainstream science until thousands of years later. The Mesopotamian temples maintained libraries of cuneiform tablets containing detailed technical information about agriculture, metallurgy, and engineering. Similar institutions appeared in other parts of the world: the Vedic schools of India, the mystery cults of Greece and Rome, the Druidic colleges of Celtic Europe, and the priest-astronomer schools of the Americas. All showed remarkable similarities in their teachings, suggesting they derived from a common source. These knowledge preservation systems were designed with multiple layers of security. Basic information was available to ordinary students, while advanced secrets were revealed only to the most trusted initiates. The most dangerous technologies were encoded in symbolic language that would be meaningless to outsiders, but perfectly killer to those who had been properly instructed. The gradual release of this preserved knowledge explains many of the seemingly miraculous advances in human civilization. Major breakthroughs in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and technology often occurred when mystery school initiates introduced concepts that had been preserved from much earlier periods. One of the most significant consequences of the Anunnaki withdrawal was the transformation of direct relationships with physical beings into abstract religious systems. As the Anunnaki became less directly involved in human affairs, they gradually morphed from visible rulers into invisible gods, who communicated through priests, prophets, and sacred texts. This transition served the interests of both species. For the Anunnaki, it allowed them to maintain influence and control without the burden of constant direct management. For humans, it provided a familiar framework for understanding cosmic order and social hierarchy without requiring proof of continuing Anunnaki presence. The process wasn't uniform across all human cultures. Some civilizations, particularly those in more isolated areas, maintained more direct contact with Anunnaki representatives for longer periods. Others developed more abstract theological systems that emphasized faith over direct experience. The monotheistic religions that emerged during the first millennium BCE represent a further evolution of this process. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all incorporate elements that can be traced back to Anunnaki origins, but they present these elements within frameworks that emphasize divine transcendence rather than physical presence. The concept of a single supreme god may reflect the historical dominance of Marduk and his successors over other Anunnaki leaders. The emphasis on moral law and human responsibility may represent lessons learned from the pre-flood catastrophe. The promise of eventual divine return may preserve memories of the periodic return of Nibiru and its inhabitants. Despite their physical withdrawal, the Anunnaki left behind numerous examples of advanced technology that continue to puzzle archaeologists and historians. These artifacts, monuments, and installations suggest that the technological capabilities of ancient civilizations were far greater than mainstream academic opinion allows. The precision cutting and placement of massive stone blocks in structures like the Egyptian pyramids, Stonehenge, and Puma Punku in Bolivia require techniques that supposedly weren't invented until the modern era. The mathematical and astronomical knowledge encoded in these monuments exceeds what hunter-gatherer societies should have been able to develop on their own. Similarly, ancient texts contain remarkably accurate astronomical information that wouldn't have been observable without advanced instruments. The Mayan calendar system, for example, tracks celestial cycles with a precision that rivals modern computerized calculation. The ancient Indian Vedas contain descriptions of aircraft, weapons, and communication devices that sound remarkably similar to modern technology. These anomalies make sense if we understand them as remnants of Anunnaki technology, either used directly by their human servants or copied by human craftsmen working under Anunnaki supervision. The knowledge and techniques were preserved in secret schools and gradually released to human civilization as needed, but the most significant technological legacy may be humanity itself. If the tablets are accurate, human beings are the result of genetic engineering that combined Anunnaki DNA with that of earlier hominids. This would explain many puzzles about human evolution, including the relatively rapid development of intelligence, the absence of clear evolutionary predecessors, and the existence of genetic anomalies that seem to have no adaptive advantage. Although the Anunnaki withdrew from direct rule thousands of years ago, evidence suggests their influence continues to shape human affairs through the bloodlines, institutions, and knowledge systems they established before their departure. The hybrid royal families that once ruled openly as divine kings have evolved into more subtle forms of leadership, but many still maintain their special status and responsibilities. Modern research into genetic genealogy has revealed that a surprisingly small number of male lineages account for a large percentage of the human gene pool, suggesting that a few individuals in the past had far more reproductive success than would be expected in normal circumstances. The mystery schools and secret societies that preserved Anunnaki knowledge have also evolved and adapted to modern circumstances. Organizations like the Freemasons, Rosicrucians, and various occult orders claim to possess ancient wisdom and to guide human development according to cosmic principles that align remarkably well with what the tablets describe as Anunnaki policy. Modern scientific breakthroughs often seem to rediscover concepts that were already known to these esoteric traditions. The development of nuclear energy, genetic engineering, space travel, and computer technology all follow patterns that were anticipated in ancient texts and preserved in symbolic form by initiatic schools. The influence may also be more direct than these historical continuities suggest. UFO researchers have noted that many reported alien encounters describe beings whose appearance and behavior are remarkably consistent with ancient descriptions of the Anunnaki. If these encounters are genuine, they may represent ongoing contact between humanity and its creator. Perhaps the most significant aspect of Anunnaki legacy is the widespread belief found in cultures around the world that the gods will someday return to Earth. This isn't just a vague spiritual hope, but a specific expectation based on astronomical cycles and ancient prophecies. The tablets describe Nibiru as having a 3,600-year orbital period that periodically brings it back into the inner solar system. According to various calculations, the planet's next close approach to Earth should occur sometime in the early 21st century, essentially now, from our perspective. This timing correlation has led some researchers to speculate that the current period represents a transition point in human development, when direct contact with the Anunnaki may be re-established. The acceleration of technological development, the emergence of global communications and transportation networks, and the beginning of serious space exploration may all be preparation for this renewed relationship. Ancient prophecies from multiple cultures describe a time when the gods return from the sky and establish a new golden age of peace, prosperity, and spiritual development. But they also warn that this transition period would be marked by great upheavals, conflicts, and challenges that would test humanity's readiness for the next phase of its evolution. Whether these prophecies represent genuine predictions or merely human hopes and fears is impossible to determine with certainty, but the consistency of the themes across widely separated cultures suggests they may preserve authentic memories of cyclical contact between humanity and its creator. While skeptics dismiss the Anunnaki accounts as mythology, a growing body of archaeological evidence suggests these stories may preserve actual historical memories. Ancient sites around the world display technological capabilities and knowledge that seem inconsistent with the primitive societies that supposedly built them. The Great Pyramid of Giza remains one of the most compelling examples. Despite decades of study, mainstream archaeology still cannot explain how ancient Egyptians quarried, transported, and precisely positioned the 2.3 million stone blocks that make up this monument. Some blocks weigh over 70 tons and were somehow lifted to heights of nearly 500 feet using techniques that remain mysterious. The precision of the pyramid's construction is equally puzzling. The base is level to within just 2.1 centimeters. The sides are oriented to the cardinal directions within 3 to 1/60th of a degree, and the entire structure incorporates mathematical constants like pi and the golden ratio that weren't supposed to be known until much later periods. But perhaps most significantly, the Great Pyramid's internal structure includes features that serve no apparent purpose, according to conventional theories about its function as a tomb. The so-called Queen's Chamber contains a shaft that leads to an empty space behind the wall. The King's Chamber is built with granite blocks that exhibit signs of extreme precision machining. The Grand Gallery incorporates acoustic properties that amplify certain frequencies while dampening others. These features make sense if we understand the pyramid not as a tomb, but as a functional technology, perhaps a power plant, communication device, or transportation hub, as described in ancient texts. The Anunnaki tablets describe similar structures serving as landing platforms and energy generation facilities for their aircraft. Similar anomalies appear at sites around the world. Puma Punku in Bolivia contains stone blocks cut with such precision that they fit together without mortar, despite weighing hundreds of tons each. The cutting shows evidence of advanced machinery, perfectly straight lines, precise right angles, and complex three-dimensional curves that would be difficult to achieve even with modern tools. Göbekli Tepe, in Turkey, recently dated to over 11,000 years old, consists of massive stone pillars arranged in precise circular patterns and decorated with sophisticated carved relief. This predates the supposed invention of agriculture by several thousand years, suggesting that advanced civilizations existed much earlier than previously thought. The Easter Island statues, Stonehenge, the Nazca Lines, Angkor Wat, and dozens of other ancient sites all display similar characteristics: massive scale, precise construction, advanced astronomical alignments, and purposes that remain mysterious to conventional archaeology. The global distribution of these sites suggests they were part of a coordinated network rather than isolated local development. Sumerian civilization presents perhaps the most dramatic example of inexplicably rapid development in human history. Around 300–500 BCE, in the space of just a few centuries, a sophisticated urban civilization emerged in southern Mesopotamia with no apparent predecessors or developmental stages. The Sumerians had everything: writing, mathematics, astronomy, metallurgy, agriculture, law, government, literature, and art. They invented the wheel, the sailboat, the plough, and the potter's wheel. They developed the first schools, libraries, courts, and hospitals. They created the first written laws, the first literature, and the first historical records. This wasn't a gradual development over thousands of years. It was an explosion of knowledge and capability that appeared virtually overnight in historical terms. Mainstream archaeology struggles to explain how hunter-gatherer societies could have made such rapid advances without outside assistance. The Sumerian language itself is an anomaly. It belongs to no known language family and shows no clear relationship to any other human language. It appears fully formed in the earliest texts, with complex grammar, extensive vocabulary, and sophisticated literary conventions already in place. This suggests it may have been introduced from outside, rather than developing naturally from earlier local languages. Sumerian mathematical and astronomical knowledge was remarkably advanced. They used a base 60 numbering system that we still use for measuring time and angles. They knew the precise length of the year, the cycles of the planets, and the patterns of eclipses. They had detailed maps of the night sky that included stars too faint to see without telescopes. Their medical knowledge was equally impressive. Sumerian texts described surgical procedures, pharmaceutical preparations, and anatomical understanding that wouldn't be matched again until the modern era. They knew about circulation, infection, and the function of various organs. They performed eye surgery, brain surgery, and other complex medical procedures. Perhaps most tellingly, the Sumerians claimed they didn't invent any of this knowledge themselves. According to their own records, all of their civilization's achievements were gifts from the Anunnaki, who descended from the sky and taught humans everything they needed to know. One of the most compelling aspects of the Anunnaki account is its description of a global flood that destroyed the previous human civilization. This story appears in the mythologies of cultures around the world, suggesting it may preserve memories of an actual historical event. Over 500 flood legends have been documented from cultures across 6 continents. The details vary, but the core elements remain remarkably consistent. A great deluge destroys most of humanity, a few people survive in a boat, and civilization must be rebuilt from scratch. The similarity of these stories across widely separated cultures suggests they derive from a common source. Geological evidence supports the possibility of catastrophic flooding at the end of the last ice age. As massive ice sheets melted, sea levels rose by hundreds of feet over a relatively short period. Coastal areas where most human populations lived would have been completely inundated. The Black Sea region, adjacent to ancient Mesopotamia, shows clear evidence of sudden catastrophic flooding around 7,500 years ago. Underwater archaeological surveys have revealed submerged shorelines, towns, and agricultural areas that were once above sea level. Core samples from the seafloor show a distinct layer of sand and shells that marks the moment when salt water suddenly flooded what had been a freshwater lake. Similar evidence of rapid sea level changes appears around the world. Submerged ruins off the coasts of India, Japan, the Mediterranean, and the Americas all suggest that advanced coastal civilizations existed before being inundated by rising water. The Younger Dryas period, approximately 12,900 to 11,700 years ago, saw rapid climate changes that included both massive flooding and severe cooling. This corresponds roughly to the time frame suggested by various ancient sources for the Great Flood. Some researchers suggest this climate change was triggered by asteroid or comet impacts that melted ice sheets and threw debris into the atmosphere. But the Anunnaki tablet suggests the flood was not a random natural disaster, but a deliberately triggered event. If an advanced civilization possessed weather modification technology, they could have accelerated natural processes to achieve the same result in a much shorter time frame. Ancient texts contain descriptions of technologies that sound remarkably similar to modern inventions, suggesting that advanced knowledge existed in antiquity and was later lost during various catastrophes and dark ages. The Sanskrit epics of India described vimanas, flying vehicles capable of interplanetary travel. These aren't vague mythological references, but detailed technical descriptions that include propulsion systems, navigation equipment, and weapons. The Vimanaka Shastra, supposedly based on ancient sources, provides construction details, fuel specifications, and operational procedures for these aircraft. Some of these descriptions are remarkably specific. The texts describe different types of vimanas for different purposes: small personal aircraft, large transport vehicles, and massive motherships capable of carrying thousands of passengers. They detail various propulsion systems including mercury-based engines, solar power collectors, and what sound like ion drives. The weapons described in these texts are equally advanced. The Brahmastra is said to be capable of destroying entire armies or cities, leaving areas uninhabitable for generations afterward. The symptoms described, burns, hair loss, nausea, sound remarkably like radiation sickness. Some passages describe weapons that target specific ethnic groups, while leaving others unharmed, suggesting genetic or biological warfare techniques. Ancient Egyptian texts also contain technological anomalies. The Dendera light reliefs appear to show electrical devices, including what look like light bulbs, power cables, and electrical insulators. The Baghdad battery, a 2,000-year-old clay jar containing copper and iron electrodes, produces electrical current when filled with an acidic solution. The precision of ancient metalworking also suggests advanced techniques. The iron pillar of Delhi, erected over 1600 years ago, shows no signs of rust, despite being exposed to the elements. Its composition and structure indicate metallurgical knowledge that wasn't supposedly available until modern times. Ancient maps show geographical knowledge that shouldn't have existed without aerial reconnaissance. The Piri Reis map of 5013 accurately depicts the coastline of Antarctica without ice cover, something that wasn't confirmed by modern science until the 1950s. The map claims to be based on much older sources, some dating back thousands of years. Modern genetic research has revealed several puzzling aspects of human evolution that align surprisingly well with the Anunnaki account of human creation through genetic engineering. The human genome contains what scientists call junk DNA, sequences that serve no apparent function but make up the majority of our genetic material. Some researchers suggest this non-coding DNA might contain information from genetic ancestors that is no longer active, but could potentially be reactivated under certain circumstances. Human chromosome 2 shows clear evidence of genetic manipulation. It appears to be the result of two separate chromosomes being fused together, something that doesn't occur naturally in related species. This fusion would have been necessary to create a stable hybrid between two genetically distinct parent species. The rate of human evolutionary change is also anomalous. Most species evolve gradually over millions of years, but humans developed advanced intelligence, complex language, and sophisticated tool use in a remarkably short time frame. This rapid development is more consistent with directed genetic modification than natural selection. Mitochondrial DNA studies suggest that all modern humans descend from a small population that lived in Africa around. This mitochondrial Eve wasn't the first human but rather the matrilineal ancestor of all surviving human lineages. This bottleneck effect is consistent with the Anunnaki account of human creation from a limited number of genetically modified individuals. Y chromosome studies show a similar pattern for the male lineages, with most human males descending from a much smaller number of ancestors than would be expected from natural population growth. This suggests that a small number of males had far more reproductive success than normal, possibly because they possessed genetic advantages that made them preferred breeding partners. The distribution of certain genetic markers also suggests non-random breeding patterns in human prehistory. Some populations show evidence of admixture with unknown genetic sources that don't match any known human or pre-human populations. These ghost populations might represent the genetic contribution of the Anunnaki themselves. Blood type distributions provide another puzzle. The Rh negative blood factor appears to have no evolutionary advantage and causes complications during pregnancy, yet it persists in certain populations at relatively high frequencies. Some researchers suggest this might represent genetic material from a non-terrestrial. Ancient monuments around the world show sophisticated astronomical alignments that require precise knowledge of celestial mechanics. This astronomical obsession suggests that ancient civilizations were tracking specific celestial events, possibly the orbital cycle of Nibiru, as described in the Anunnaki tablets. The Great Pyramid's internal passages are aligned to specific stars and constellations at particular time periods. The descending passage points to the ancient pole star Alpha Draconis, while the ascending passage targets the star Alcyone in the Pleiades cluster. These alignments weren't arbitrary, they correspond to significant dates in ancient Mesopotamian astronomy. Stonehenge functions as a complex astronomical calculator capable of predicting eclipses, solstices, and planetary conjunctions. The arrangement of stones creates sightlines that track the movements of the sun, moon, and various planets over long time cycles. Similar astronomical functions have been identified at stone circles throughout Britain and Europe. The Mayan calendar system demonstrates incredibly precise knowledge of planetary cycles and celestial mechanics. The Maya calculated the length of the solar year as 3065.2420 days, compared to the modern value of 3065.2422 days. and accuracy of numbers. They also tracked Venus cycles, Mars oppositions, and Jupiter's orbital period with remarkable precision. Ancient Mesopotamian astronomy was equally advanced. Babylonian astronomers could predict planetary positions, lunar eclipses, and other celestial events centuries in advance. Their mathematical models for planetary motion were so accurate that they weren't surpassed until the work of Kepler and Newton in the 7th. This astronomical knowledge seems far beyond what would be needed for basic agricultural or navigational purposes. The level of precision and the focus on long-term celestial cycles suggests these civilizations were tracking something specific, possibly the return of a celestial body with a very long orbital period. The 3,600-year cycle mentioned in Anunnaki texts corresponds to what astronomers call a shah, an important unit in Mesopotamian astronomy and mathematics. This number appears repeatedly in ancient texts as a measure of divine time, suggesting it had special significance beyond mere mathematical convenience. The gradual withdrawal of direct Anunnaki involvement led to the establishment of mystery schools and priestly orders designed to preserve and transmit advanced knowledge through human institutions. These organizations became the guardians of ancient wisdom, maintaining scientific and technological information that would otherwise have been lost. The Mesopotamian temple complexes weren't just religious centers. They were research institutions, libraries, schools, and observatories all rolled into one. The priests who served in these temples were trained in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, law, and engineering. They maintained extensive archives of cuneiform tablets containing technical manuals, historical records, and scientific observations. The Babylonian Magi represented one of the most advanced of these knowledge-keeping orders. They were master astronomers who could predict celestial events with extraordinary accuracy. They also practiced medicine, metallurgy, chemistry, and what we might now call psychology or neuroscience. Their influence extended far beyond Mesopotamia, with students coming from Greece, Egypt, India, and other civilizations to study with them. These mystery schools operated on a hierarchical system of initiation, where students gradually gained access to more advanced knowledge as they proved their understanding and loyalty. Basic mathematical and astronomical knowledge was available to lower-level initiates, while the most advanced secrets were revealed only to the highest-ranking masters. The secrecy wasn't arbitrary. It was a practical necessity for preserving dangerous knowledge through periods of political instability, foreign conquest, and social upheaval. By encoding advanced concepts in religious symbolism and mythological narratives, the mystery schools could maintain their teachings even when direct transmission was impossible. Many of the symbols, rituals, and teachings of these ancient schools were later incorporated into Greek mystery cults, Roman religious orders, and eventually into medieval and modern esoteric organizations. The continuity of these traditions suggests an unbroken chain of knowledge transmission stretching back to the earliest civilization. Egypt presents a parallel development to Mesopotamian civilization, with its own group of Anunnaki rulers, who became known by different names in Egyptian mythology. The similarities between Egyptian and Mesopotamian technologies, religious concepts, and astronomical knowledge suggest they were part of the same overall system of Anunnaki guidance. The Egyptian pantheon shows clear correspondences to Mesopotamian deities. Thoth corresponds to Enki as a god of wisdom and knowledge. Ptah resembles Enlil as a creator deity associated with craftsmanship. Ra, the sun god, may represent Marduk in his role as supreme deity. These aren't mere mythological parallels. They may represent the same individuals operating in different geographical regions. Egyptian architectural achievements are even more impressive than those in Mesopotamia. The Great Pyramid's construction required moving over 6 million tons of stone with tolerances measured in millimeters. The Sphinx shows evidence of water erosion that suggests it's much older than traditionally believed. The temple complex at Baalbek includes stone blocks weighing over 1,000 tons that were somehow lifted and positioned with perfect precision. The Egyptian mastery of chemistry and material science is evident in their mummification techniques, which preserved organic materials for thousands of years. They also created synthetic materials like faience and glass. that required precise temperature control and chemical knowledge. Their medical papyri described surgical procedures and pharmaceutical preparations that rival modern techniques. Egyptian astronomical knowledge was equally advanced. The layout of the Giza pyramid complex mirrors the pattern of stars in Orion's belt. The temples at Karnak and Luxor incorporate astronomical alignments that track precession cycles over thousands of years. The Egyptian calendar was more accurate than the Julian calendar used in Europe until relatively recent times. The Egyptians also maintained extensive libraries and educational institutions. The Great Library of Alexandria, though built in the Ptolemaic period, claimed to collect knowledge from much earlier sources. It reportedly contained hundreds of thousands of scrolls covering every aspect of human knowledge, many derived from ancient temple archives. The Indus Valley Civilization presents another example of rapid, unexplained development in human history. Like Sumer and Egypt, it appeared suddenly around 200 and 600 BCE with fully developed urban planning, standardized measurements, advanced metallurgy, and sophisticated drainage systems. Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, the largest Indus cities, show evidence of centralized planning that rivals modern urban design. Streets were laid out in perfect grid patterns. Every house had running water and sewage connections. Public wells, baths, and granaries were strategically located throughout the cities. The level of standardization across the Indus Valley suggests central authority with advanced knowledge of engineering and mathematics. Weights and measures were identical across hundreds of settlements, separated by thousands of miles. Brick sizes were standardized to precise ratios. Even the writing system, though still undeciphered, shows consistent character forms across the entire region. The sudden disappearance of Indus Valley civilization around 1900 BCE is equally mysterious. The cities weren't destroyed by warfare or natural disasters, they were simply abandoned. The population seems to have dispersed into smaller rural settlements, taking their advanced knowledge with them. Some researchers suggest the Indus script may be related to early forms of Sanskrit, which would connect it to the Vedic traditions that preserve some of the most detailed accounts of advanced ancient technologies. The Vedas describe aerial vehicles, sophisticated weapons, and scientific knowledge that seems far beyond what Bronze Age societies should have possessed. The geographical location of the Indus Valley also makes it significant in Anunnaki accounts. Ancient texts describe travel routes between Mesopotamia and the Indus region, suggesting ongoing contact and trade between these civilizations. The sudden appearance and disappearance of Indus civilization might correlate with periods of Anunnaki presence and withdrawal. Evidence of advanced ancient civilizations isn't limited to the Old World. Archaeological sites throughout the Americas show sophisticated knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, engineering, and metallurgy that challenges conventional theories about the isolation of pre-Columbian cultures. The Maya developed the most accurate calendar system in the ancient world, tracking celestial cycles with precision that wasn't matched until the modern era. Their long count calendar, which began in 31114 BCE, tracks a 5025-year cycle that corresponds to significant astronomical events. The recent completion of this cycle in 2012 has led to speculation about its significance in ancient prophetic traditions. Mayan astronomical knowledge extended far beyond basic calendar calculations. They tracked Venus cycles, predicted eclipses, calculated planetary conjunctions centuries in advance. Their mathematical system included the concept of zero, which wasn't developed in Europe until much later. They also used Vibhajamal notation that allowed for extremely large numerical calculations. The construction techniques used in Mayan architecture also suggest advanced knowledge. Stones were cut and fitted with precision rivaling modern standards. Some structures show evidence of sound engineering principles, with acoustic properties that amplify voices or create specific sound effects. The Temple of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza produces a chirping echo that mimics the call of the Quetzal bird. Similar anomalies appear throughout the Americas. The Nazca lines in Peru are geometric patterns and animal figures that can only be properly viewed from the air, suggesting their creators had access to flight technology. The precision of the lines and the coordination required to create them over such a vast area indicates sophisticated surveying and construction techniques. Puma Punku in Bolivia contains some of the most precisely cut stone blocks found anywhere in the world. The surfaces are perfectly flat. The angles are exactly 90 degrees, and complex three-dimensional shapes are carved with machine-like precision. The blocks fit together so perfectly that not even a knife blade can be inserted between them. The ancient city of Teotihuacan in Mexico was laid out according to precise astronomical alignments and mathematical principles. The Pyramid of the Sun is positioned to mark the passage of the Pleiades star cluster. The entire city plan incorporates proportions and measurements that suggest advanced geometric knowledge. The similarities between ancient civilizations separated by vast distances suggest they were part of a coordinated global network rather than isolated local developments. The same architectural techniques, astronomical alignments, mythological themes, and technological capabilities appear in widely separated cultures, indicating contact and communication across continents. The pyramid form appears on every continent: Egypt, Mesopotamia, China, India, Southeast Asia, Europe, and the Americas. These structures weren't just random architectural choices. They incorporated specific proportions, alignments, and internal features that served similar functions across cultures. This suggests they were built according to common plans or specifications provided by a central authority. Megalithic construction techniques also show remarkable consistency worldwide. The same methods for quarrying, transporting, and positioning massive stone blocks appear at sites from Easter Island to Stonehenge to Baalbek. The precision of construction and the ability to work with blocks weighing hundreds of tons suggests access to advanced lifting and moving technologies. Astronomical alignments follow similar patterns globally. Ancient sites track the same celestial events: solstices, equinoxes, specific star positions, and planetary cycles. The precision of these alignments and their focus on long-term astronomical phenomena suggests coordinated observation and record-keeping across civilization. Mythological themes also show striking similarities: flood stories, creation myths, accounts of gods from the sky, and prophecies of divine return appear in cultures that supposedly had no contact with each other. These stories aren't just vague similarities. They often contain specific details that are identical across widely separated traditions. The distribution of certain technologies also suggests global communication. Metallurgical techniques, agricultural methods, mathematical concepts, and medical knowledge spread far more rapidly than would be possible through normal cultural diffusion. The sudden appearance of advanced techniques in multiple locations simultaneously suggests coordinated technology transfer. The Book of Enoch, though not included in the standard biblical canon, provides detailed information about the Watchers, beings who descended from heaven and took human wives, producing hybrid offspring. This account corresponds closely to Mesopotamian descriptions of the Anunnaki and their interactions with humanity. According to Enoch, 200 Watchers descended to Mount Hermon under the leadership of Semjaza. They swore an oath to take human wives despite knowing this violated divine law. The hybrid children they produced were the Nephilim giants, who became mighty warriors and rulers, but also brought violence and corruption to human society. The Watchers taught humans various forbidden arts. Azazel taught metallurgy and weapons making. Kokabel taught astronomy. Chazakiel taught knowledge of clouds and weather. Barakiel taught astrology, and others taught medicine, mathematics, and other advanced science. This corresponds to Anunnaki accounts of technology transfer to human civilization. The similarities between the Enoch account and Mesopotamian tablets are striking. Both describe beings from the sky who intermarry with humans, produce hybrid offspring, teach advanced knowledge, and eventually bring about divine judgment through a great flood. The names, locations, and specific details often correspond exactly between the two traditions. The Paninum to the Watchers also parallels Anunnaki accounts. According to Enoch, the rebellious angels were bound and imprisoned until the day of judgment, while their hybrid children were destroyed in the flood. This corresponds to descriptions of Anunnaki's civil war and the decision to eliminate the Nephilim population. The Book of Enoch was apparently well known in ancient times and is quoted or referenced in several New Testament books. Its exclusion from the biblical canon may reflect later theological discomfort with its detailed descriptions of divine-human interaction and its implications for the nature of human origin. Modern discoveries of additional Enoch manuscripts among the Dead Sea Scrolls have confirmed the antiquity and widespread acceptance of these traditions in ancient Judaism. The consistency of the accounts across multiple manuscript traditions suggests they preserve authentic historical memories rather than later mythological inventions. The Sumerian king list presents one of the most puzzling documents in ancient literature, with its claims of rulers who reigned for tens of thousands of years before gradually decreasing to more normal human lifespans. Mainstream historians dismiss these figures as mythological exaggerations, but they may preserve accurate records of Anunnaki human hybrid rulers. The pattern in the king list is very specific. The earliest rulers have lifespans of 20,000 to 40,000 years, gradually decreasing through subsequent dynasties until reaching lifespans of hundreds or thousands of years, and eventually settling into normal human ranges. This progression suggests gradual genetic dilution as Anunnaki genes were passed down through human generations. The mathematical precision of the numbers is also significant. Many of the reign lengths are multiples of 3,600, the Shah, suggesting they may represent actual time measurements rather than symbolic exaggerations. If the Anunnaki had lifespans measured in tens of thousands of years, these figures might be literally accurate. The division between pre-flood and post-flood rulers is another important feature. The king list explicitly states that the flood swept over, and then the kingship was lowered again from heaven. Post-flood rulers have generally shorter lifespans than their predecessors, consistent with the reduced genetic contribution from Anunnaki ancestors. Archaeological evidence supports the existence of many rulers named in the king list, particularly those from later periods. As the claimed lifespans approach normal human ranges, the historical accuracy of the document increases. This suggests the entire list may be based on authentic records, with the early portions preserving information about non-human rule. The geographical distribution of the dynasties also follows patterns described in Anunnaki accounts. Different cities are associated with different ruling lineages, suggesting territorial divisions among Anunnaki leaders who established their own regional kingdoms and dynasties. Recent advances in genetic sequencing and analysis have revealed several anomalies in human DNA that align with ancient accounts of genetic manipulation and hybridization. While mainstream science attributes these features to natural evolutionary processes, they could also be interpreted as evidence of deliberate genetic engineering. Human chromosome 2 shows clear evidence of genetic fusion that doesn't occur in related primate species. This fusion appears to have been necessary for creating genetic stability in a hybrid organism, exactly what would be required if humans were created by combining DNA from two different species. The human genome also contains unusually high numbers of pseudogenes, genetic sequences that resemble functional genes but don't produce proteins. Some researchers suggest these might represent genetic material from ancestral species that was deliberately deactivated during the creation process. Mitochondrial DNA studies have revealed that all modern humans descend from a relatively small population that lived in Africa around 2000. This genetic bottleneck is consistent with creation from a limited number of genetically engineered individuals, rather than natural population growth from earlier hominid species. Y chromosome analysis shows even more dramatic bottlenecks in male lineages, with most human males descending from a very small number of successful breeding males. This pattern suggests that certain males had enormous reproductive advantages, possibly because they possessed genetic modifications that made them preferred partners. The distribution of blood types and other genetic markers also shows non-random patterns that are difficult to explain through natural selection alone. Some populations carry genetic variants that provide no apparent survival advantage but persist at high frequencies, suggesting they were selected for other reasons. Recent discoveries in epigenetics have shown that environmental factors can activate or deactivate genetic sequences, potentially allowing dormant ancestral genetic material to be expressed under certain conditions. This mechanism could explain how advanced capabilities might be preserved in human DNA but only expressed when triggered by specific circumstances. Mainstream archaeology has ignored or suppressed evidence that challenges conventional theories about human development and the capabilities of ancient civilizations. This forbidden archaeology includes artifacts, sites, and discoveries that suggest advanced technology existed in antiquity. Out-of-place artifacts are objects that appear in geological or archaeological contexts where they shouldn't exist, according to conventional chronology. These include worked metal objects in coal seams, millions of years old, advanced mechanical devices in ancient rock formations, and precisely machined artifacts that predate the supposed invention of the necessary tools. The London hammer, found embedded in Cretaceous rock in Texas, consists of an iron head with a wooden handle that shows no signs of aging despite being supposedly 100 million years old. The metal composition includes chlorine, which isn't found in naturally occurring iron, suggesting artificial production. The Antikythera mechanism, recovered from a Greek shipwreck, is a complex bronze device with gear trains that calculate astronomical positions and predict eclipses. Its sophistication wasn't matched again until clockwork mechanisms appeared in medieval Europe, yet it dates to the 1st century BCE. The Baghdad battery consists of clay jars containing copper cylinders and iron rods that produce electrical current when filled with acidic solution. Similar devices have been found throughout the Middle East, suggesting ancient knowledge of electrochemical processes. Giant human skeletons have been reported from archaeological sites across North America, often measuring 7 to 9 feet in height with unusual skull characteristics. While most of these specimens have been lost or destroyed, contemporary newspaper accounts and photographs document numerous discoveries during the 19th and early 20th centuries. Precision-machined artifacts appear in various ancient contexts. The Saqqara bird from Egypt has aerodynamic properties that suggest it may be a model of a flying machine. Stone spheres in Costa Rica are perfectly round despite being carved from granite, requiring precision that shouldn't have been available to pre-Columbian culture. The modern rediscovery of Anunnaki history began in the 19th century with the excavation of Mesopotamian sites, but it wasn't until the 20th century that researchers began to seriously consider the possibility that these ancient texts might contain actual historical records, rather than mere mythology. Zecharia Sitchin, a Russian-born American author, revolutionized the field in 1976 with the publication of The 12th Planet, the first book in his Earth Chronicles series. Sitchin's background in ancient languages, particularly Hebrew and Sumerian, allowed him to work directly with original cuneiform tablets rather than relying on conventional translations. Sitchin's interpretation was radical. The Sumerian texts weren't mythology, but historical accounts of extraterrestrial visitors who genetically engineered humanity and ruled Earth for thousands of years. His work provided detailed analysis of Mesopotamian cosmology, genealogies, and chronologies that revealed a sophisticated understanding of astronomy, genetics, and technology. Critics argued that Sitchin's translations were unconventional and that his theories lacked academic support. However, his work inspired a new generation of researchers who began examining ancient texts, archaeological sites, and genetic evidence with fresh perspectives. Michael Tellinger, a South African researcher, extended Sitchin's work by investigating stone circle ruins in southern Africa that may represent the mining operations described in Anunnaki accounts. His surveys furthered thousands of ancient stone structures in areas rich with gold deposits, suggesting large-scale mining activities in antiquity. Lloyd Pye's work on human genetics and anomalous skulls provided scientific support for theories of genetic manipulation in human prehistory. His analysis of elongated skulls found in various parts of the world revealed genetic markers that don't match normal human population. Giorgio Tsoukalos and other researchers associated with the ancient astronauts theory have brought these ideas to mainstream attention through television programming and popular publication. While their work is often dismissed by academic establishment, they have succeeded in raising important questions about conventional interpretations of ancient history. Central to Sitchin's interpretation of Sumerian texts was the existence of Nibiru, a planet in an extended elliptical orbit around our Sun, with a period of approximately According to the tablets, Nibiru was the homeworld of the Anunnaki and the source of the periodic disruptions that punctuated human history. Astronomical evidence for such a planet remains controversial. While no large planet has been directly observed in the outer solar system, several lines of evidence suggest the existence of undiscovered celestial bodies beyond the orbit of Pluto. The discovery of Pluto in 1930 was based on calculations of gravitational perturbations affecting the orbits of Uranus and Neptune. Similar perturbations continue to be observed, suggesting additional massive objects in the outer solar system that haven't yet been identified. The Kuiper Belt and Oort cloud contain thousands of large objects in distant orbits around the Sun. Some of these objects, like Eris and Sedna, have highly elliptical orbits that take them far beyond Pluto's orbital distance. It's possible that even larger objects exist in similar orbits but haven't been detected because they're currently too far from the Sun to be easily observed. Recent computer simulations have suggested the existence of Planet 9, a super-Earth-sized planet in a distant elliptical orbit, that could explain the unusual clustering of small objects in the outer solar system. While Planet 9 hasn't been directly observed, its gravitational effects may be detectable through its influence on other celestial bodies. The 3,600-year orbital period described in Sumerian texts would place Nibiru's aphelion at approximately 300–500 astronomical units, well beyond the orbit of Pluto, but within the realm of possibility for a large planet in an extremely elliptical orbit. Climate records from ice cores and tree rings show periodic disruptions that could correlate with the proposed orbital cycle of Nibiru. Every 3,600 years or so, Earth appears to experience significant climate changes, extinction events, or civilizational collapses that might be related to gravitational or electromagnetic effects from a passing massive object. Modern genetics has provided new ways to test the ancient claims about human origins through genetic manipulation. While mainstream science attributes human evolution to natural processes, several genetic anomalies suggest possible intervention by an advanced civilization. The missing link problem in human evolution has become more pronounced as genetic sequencing has revealed the extent of differences between humans and other primates. Humans share 98.8% of their DNA with chimpanzees, but the remaining 1.2% represents millions of genetic differences that accumulated in a remarkably short evolutionary time frame. Human chromosome 2 provides the clearest evidence of possible genetic manipulation. This chromosome appears to be the result of two separate chromosomes being fused together, something that doesn't occur naturally in related species. The fusion points are still clearly visible in the genetic sequence, complete with telomeres in the middle of the chromosome where they shouldn't exist naturally. The human brain's rapid development is another evolutionary anomaly. The tripling of brain size from early hominids to modern humans occurred in about 2 million years, extremely rapid by evolutionary standards. This development required significant changes in skull structure, birth canal size, and metabolic requirements that should have taken much longer to evolve naturally. Human genetic diversity is unusually low compared to other species, suggesting the entire human population descended from a small number of founding individuals. This genetic bottleneck is consistent with creation from a limited breeding population, rather than natural evolution from larger ancestral groups. The distribution of blood types and other genetic markers shows patterns that are difficult to explain through random genetic drift. Some populations carry genetic variants that provide no apparent survival advantage, but persist at high frequencies, suggesting they were selected for other reasons. Recent discoveries in epigenetics have revealed that environmental factors can activate dormant genetic sequences, potentially allowing ancestral genetic material to be expressed under certain conditions. This could explain how advanced capabilities might be preserved in human DNA but only activated when needed. The modern UFO phenomenon, beginning with widespread sightings after World War II, may represent renewed contact between humanity and its original creators. Many reported encounters describe beings and technologies that closely match ancient descriptions of the Anunnaki. The physical appearance of reported extraterrestrial beings often corresponds to ancient artistic depictions. The tall human-like figures with elongated skulls and large eyes match Mesopotamian and Egyptian representations of divine beings. Some encounters describe beings who claim to be the original creators or teachers of human civilization. The technology reported in UFO encounters also shows similarities to ancient descriptions. Spacecraft that can hover silently, accelerate instantaneously, and travel between planets match the divine boats and sky chambers mentioned in Sumerian texts. The advanced materials and propulsion systems suggest technologies far beyond current human capability. Abduction reports often include genetic experimentation and hybrid breeding programs that parallel ancient accounts of Anunnaki human reproduction. Some abductees report being told they are part of ongoing genetic research or that their children are being used to create hybrid populations for future colonization efforts. The timing of increased UFO activity coincides with humanity's development of nuclear technology and space travel, capabilities that would signal our readiness for renewed contact with advanced civilization. The post-WW2 surge in sightings began shortly after the first atomic weapons were detonated, possibly alerting distant observers to our technological progress. Government investigations into UFO phenomena, though officially dismissed or classified, suggest official awareness of unexplained aerial phenomena that demonstrate advanced technology. Recent declassification of military UFO videos and official acknowledgement of unidentified aerial phenomena indicate that governments take these sightings seriously despite public skepticism. Modern research into secret societies and elite bloodlines has revealed organizational structures and belief systems that appear to derive from ancient mystery schools and Anunnaki traditions. These groups may represent the continuation of hybrid bloodlines and preserved knowledge systems established in antiquity. Genealogical research has shown that many of the world's most powerful families trace their lineages back to ancient royal dynasties that claimed divine ancestry. The European royal families, American founding fathers, and modern business and political elites show surprising interconnections when their family trees are analyzed. The persistence of certain symbolic and ritual elements across centuries suggests continuous transmission of esoteric knowledge. Masonic symbolism, for example, incorporates architectural and astronomical motifs that derive directly from ancient Mesopotamian and Egyptian traditions. The degrees and initiation processes mirror the hierarchical knowledge systems of ancient mystery schools. Secret societies like the Illuminati, Skull and Bones, and various Rosicrucian orders claim to possess ancient wisdom that guides their members' actions in modern affairs. While the specific details of their beliefs are kept secret, their public statements often reference the need to guide human development according to cosmic principles. The concept of a new world order, promoted by various elite groups, corresponds remarkably well to ancient descriptions of Anunnaki plans for human civilization. The emphasis on global government, population control, technological advancement, and spiritual development matches themes found in Mesopotamian prophecies about the return of divine rule. Modern genetic testing has made it possible to trace ancestral lineages with unprecedented accuracy. Some researchers claim to have identified genetic markers that correlate with membership in these elite families, suggesting they may indeed represent distinct bloodlines with unusual genetic characteristics. The rapid advancement of human technology in the past century mirrors the descriptions of Anunnaki capabilities found in ancient texts. Technologies that seemed magical or impossible when described in ancient sources are now becoming reality through human scientific development. Genetic engineering has advanced to the point where scientists can create hybrid organisms, modify existing species, and potentially create entirely new life forms. CRISPR and other gene editing technologies allow precise modification of DNA sequences, exactly the kind of capabilities described in accounts of human creation by the Anunnaki. Space travel and planetary exploration are now routine, with missions to Mars, the outer planets, and beyond. The development of reusable spacecraft, permanent space stations, and plans for interplanetary colonization mirror the ancient descriptions of Anunnaki space travel and off-world mining operations. Artificial intelligence and computer technology are approaching levels that could match or exceed human cognitive capabilities. The development of quantum computers, neural networks, and machine learning systems suggests that artificial intelligence might soon reach the godlike levels of knowledge and capability attributed to the Anunnaki. Nanotechnology and advanced material science are producing substances and devices that seem almost magical in their capability. Self-assembling materials, programmable matter, and molecular-scale manufacturing could eventually produce the kinds of advanced technologies described in ancient texts. Energy production and manipulation are advancing toward capabilities that could control weather, modify landscapes, and power interstellar travel. Fusion power, antimatter engines, and exotic energy sources might eventually provide the kinds of cosmic-scale power that ancient texts attribute to divine beings. Recent research into consciousness, psychic phenomena, and the nature of reality has suggested that human cognitive capabilities may be far greater than previously believed. Ancient accounts describe the Anunnaki as possessing mental abilities that transcended normal physical limitations, capabilities that modern humans might also possess, but have forgotten how to access. Quantum mechanics has revealed that consciousness may play a fundamental role in shaping physical reality. The observer effect demonstrates that the act of observation influences the behavior of subatomic particles, suggesting that mind and matter are more intimately connected than classical physics assume. Studies of psychic phenomena, while controversial, have documented instances of telepathy, precognition, and psychokinesis that exceed statistical probability. If these abilities are real, they might represent dormant capabilities inherited from our Anunnaki ancestors that could be reactivated under certain conditions. Near-death experiences and altered states of consciousness often involve encounters with beings who claim to be teachers, guides, or creators of human civilization. These experiences frequently include information about human origins, purpose, and destiny that aligns with ancient Anunnaki accounts. Meditation, shamanic practices, and other consciousness-altering techniques can produce experiences that transcend normal limitations of time, space, and identity. Advanced practitioners report direct communication with non-physical beings, access to universal knowledge, and abilities that seem to defy physical laws. The development of brain-computer interfaces and neural enhancement technologies might eventually restore or amplify these latent human capabilities. If consciousness is indeed fundamental to reality, then enhancing human consciousness could provide access to the kinds of cosmic awareness attributed to divine beings in ancient texts. The Anunnaki account of human origins raises profound questions about the nature of spirituality, religion, and humanity's relationship to the divine. If humans were created by advanced physical beings rather than supernatural gods, how does this affect traditional religious beliefs and spiritual practices? Many religious traditions contain elements that could be reinterpreted in light of Anunnaki theory. The concept of humanity being created in the image of God might refer to genetic engineering rather than supernatural creation. Stories of divine beings interacting with humans might preserve memories of actual historical events rather than purely spiritual encounters. The emphasis on moral development and spiritual growth found in religious traditions might represent authentic guidance from advanced beings who understood the importance of consciousness evolution for species development. The ethical teachings of major religions could be practical instructions for developing the kind of civilization that advanced beings would want to interact with. Prophecies about the return of divine beings, the establishment of a golden age, and the transformation of human consciousness might describe actual future events rather than symbolic spiritual development. If the Anunnaki are real and continue to monitor human progress, these prophecies might represent their plans for humanity's next evolutionary phase. The concept of eternal life or immortality, found in many religious traditions, might refer to the extended lifespans of the Anunnaki rather than purely spiritual existence. If humans carry Anunnaki genetic material, it's possible that latent longevity mechanisms could be activated through technological or consciousness-based methods. The idea that humans have a cosmic destiny or divine purpose might be literally true if we were created to serve as intermediaries between physical and spiritual realms, or to help terraform and populate other worlds as part of an expanding galactic civilization. Current global conditions suggest that humanity may be approaching a critical transition point that could involve renewed contact with our creators, or the activation of dormant human capabilities inherited from Anunnaki ancestors. The convergence of multiple crisis factors, environmental degradation, resource depletion, social upheaval, and technological acceleration, mirrors the conditions described in ancient prophecies about the end of an age and the beginning of a new phase of human development. Climate change and environmental destruction are forcing humanity to develop new technologies and social systems that could prepare us for life on other worlds. The necessary innovations in energy production, food cultivation, habitat construction, and social organization are exactly the kinds of capabilities that would be needed for interplanetary colonization. Genetic modification and life extension technologies are advancing rapidly, potentially allowing humans to develop the extended lifespans and enhanced capabilities that characterize the Anunnaki. CRISPR gene editing, stem cell therapy, and other biomedical advances might eventually restore the genetic potential that was diluted over thousands of generations. Artificial intelligence and computer technology are approaching levels that could augment or replace human cognitive capability. The merger of human consciousness with artificial intelligence might produce hybrid beings with capabilities that transcend both biological and mechanical limitations. Space technology and exploration are advancing toward the capability for interplanetary travel and off-world colonization. The development of reusable spacecraft, permanent space habitats, and closed-loop life support systems could eventually enable human expansion throughout the solar system and beyond. The increasing frequency of UFO sightings and official acknowledgement of unexplained aerial phenomena suggest that contact with advanced civilizations may be imminent. If these represent Anunnaki monitoring of human progress, then open contact might occur when humanity demonstrates sufficient technological and spiritual development. As we reach the end of this comprehensive examination of Anunnaki history and its implications for human civilization, we are left with profound questions about our origins, our purpose, and our future destiny. Are we alone in the universe? Or are we part of a vast community of intelligent species that includes our own creators? The evidence suggests that Earth has been visited by advanced civilizations multiple times throughout history, and that humans may be the product of genetic engineering by these visitors. What is our true relationship to the divine? If the Anunnaki were physical beings with advanced technology rather than supernatural gods, does this diminish or enhance our understanding of cosmic purpose and spiritual development? The answer may depend on whether consciousness and intelligence are fundamental aspects of reality that transcend physical existence. Are we approaching a new phase of human evolution that will restore our connection to our creators and our cosmic heritage? The rapid advancement of technology, the increasing frequency of anomalous phenomena, and the convergence of multiple global crises suggest that major changes are approaching that could transform human civilization. What responsibilities do we have as potentially hybrid beings carrying the genetic legacy of an advanced species? If humans are indeed the result of genetic engineering by the Anunnaki, then we may have inherited both capabilities and obligations that we are only beginning to understand. How should this knowledge affect our choices about technology development, social organization, and species evolution? If the Anunnaki account is accurate, then human civilization is not an isolated phenomenon, but part of a larger cosmic context that influences our options and responsibility. The evidence is compelling but not conclusive. Ancient texts describe technologies and events that seem impossible for primitive societies to have witnessed or invented. Archaeological sites display capabilities that exceed conventional explanation. Genetic anomalies suggest possible artificial intervention in human evolution. Modern phenomena mirror ancient accounts of divine beings and advanced technology. Yet mainstream science and academia continue to dismiss these possibilities, preferring explanations that fit within established paradigms even when those explanations are inadequate or contradictory. The resistance to considering alternative theories may reflect more than just scientific conservatism. It may represent a deliberate effort to suppress information that would fundamentally challenge existing power structures. If the Anunnaki account contains even partial truth, then humanity faces choices that will determine our species' future development and our relationship with the broader cosmic community. These decisions cannot be left solely to governments, corporations, or established institutions. They require informed participation by individuals who understand the stakes involved. The first step is education and awareness. The information exists in ancient texts, archaeological sites, genetic research, and modern phenomena, but it has been fragmented and marginalized by institutional resistance. Individuals must take responsibility for seeking out this information, evaluating it critically, and sharing it with others who are ready to consider these possibilities. The second step is preparation for potential contact or transformation. If renewed interaction with advanced civilizations is approaching, humanity needs to develop the technological capabilities, social structures, and consciousness levels that would enable productive relationships. This includes advancing our understanding of genetics, consciousness, energy production, and space technology. The third step is spiritual and ethical development. If humans carry genetic heritage from advanced beings, we have responsibilities to use our capabilities wisely and to develop the moral wisdom necessary to handle advanced technologies without destroying ourselves or others. This requires moving beyond tribal conflicts, resource competition, and power struggles toward cooperation and mutual development. The fourth step is active participation in humanity's evolutionary development. Rather than passively waiting for outside intervention or guidance, we can take responsibility for our own genetic, technological, and consciousness evolution. This includes supporting research into life extension, genetic optimization, artificial intelligence, and space exploration, while ensuring these developments serve beneficial purposes. The fifth step is maintaining openness to possibilities that transcend current understanding. If consciousness is fundamental to reality and if human potential extends far beyond current limitations, then rigid materialism may be as limiting as religious dogmatism. Balanced skepticism, combined with willingness to explore anomalous phenomena, may be necessary for navigating the challenges ahead. From the perspective of cosmic time, human civilization is extremely young. If the Anunnaki account is accurate, our species has existed for less than 300,000 years, and our current technological civilization for less than 10,000 years. We are children in cosmic terms, still learning how to use the capabilities we have inherited. The challenges we face, environmental destruction, resource conflicts, technological risks, and social upheaval, may be normal growing pains for a young species developing advanced capabilities. Every intelligent species probably faces similar tests as they develop technologies that can either enable interstellar expansion or cause self-destruction. Our success or failure in navigating these challenges will determine whether humanity joins the community of advanced civilizations or becomes another cautionary example of a species that destroyed itself before reaching maturity. The stakes could not be higher, but neither could the potential rewards. If we succeed in developing sustainable technologies, peaceful social systems, and enhanced consciousness capabilities, we might eventually become the kind of advanced civilization that our ancestors described as. We might travel to other worlds, genetically engineer new species, and serve as teachers and guides for younger civilizations. If we fail, we might join the countless extinct species that failed to make the transition from primitive to advanced civilization. But even failure would not be meaningless. It would provide lessons for other species facing similar challenges and contribute to the overall evolution of consciousness in the universe. The evidence suggests that we are not alone in facing these challenges. Advanced civilizations may be monitoring our progress and providing subtle guidance when appropriate, but ultimately each species must take responsibility for its own development and prove its worthiness to join the larger cosmic community. The Anunnaki story, whether interpreted as literal history or symbolic wisdom, provides a framework for understanding our place in the cosmos and our responsibilities as intelligent beings. It reminds us that we are part of something much larger than our individual lives, or even our species' survival. As we conclude this comprehensive examination of Anunnaki history and its implications for human civilization, it's important to recognize that this is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new chapter in human understanding and development. The information presented here represents the collective work of thousands of researchers, translators, archaeologists, geneticists, and independent investigators who have dedicated their lives to uncovering the truth about human origins and cosmic connections. Their work continues despite institutional resistance and popular skepticism, because the questions they address are too important to ignore. New discoveries are being made constantly. Archaeological sites are revealing evidence of advanced ancient technology. Genetic research is uncovering anomalies in human evolution. Astronomical observations are finding potentially habitable planets and searching for signs of intelligent life. Consciousness research is exploring the fundamental nature of mind and reality. Each new piece of evidence adds to the overall picture and helps us understand our place in the cosmic story. Whether or not the specific details of Anunnaki accounts are accurate, they point toward possibilities that could revolutionize our understanding of life, consciousness, and intelligence in the universe. The future of human civilization may depend on our ability to integrate this expanded perspective with practical solutions to current challenges. We need both cosmic awareness and earthly wisdom, both technological advancement and spiritual development, both individual growth and collective cooperation. The Anunnaki legacy, whether interpreted as genetic inheritance, preserved knowledge, or symbolic inspiration, provides tools for navigating the challenges ahead. But ultimately, the responsibility for humanity's future rests with each individual who chooses to seek truth, develop capabilities, and contribute to species evolution. The story that began hundreds of thousands of years ago with the arrival of advanced beings from the stars continues today with each person who opens their mind to larger possibilities and takes action to create a better future. We are all part of this ongoing cosmic drama, and our choices matter more than we might imagine. For over 4,000 years, this story was buried in the sands of Iraq. Cuneiform tablets, that archaeologists dismissed as mythology, actually contain humanity's most explosive secret. The Anunnaki weren't legends. They were the puppet masters who shaped every civilization that followed. But now the secret is out. The tablets have been translated, the evidence has been assembled, and the truth can no longer be suppressed. We know who we are, where we came from, and what our cosmic destiny might be. The question is no longer whether the Anunnaki existed. The evidence is too compelling to dismiss. The question is what we do with this knowledge. Do we use it to expand human potential and create a better future? Do we allow it to be suppressed by those who benefit from keeping humanity ignorant and divided? Or do we transcend both possibilities and chart our own course toward whatever lies ahead? The choice is ours, but we won't have forever to make it. If the ancient prophecies are accurate, we are living in the time of transition when old ages end and new ones begin. The decisions we make in the next few decades could determine the course of human evolution for thousands of years to come. The Anunnaki gave us the gift of consciousness, the burden of free will, and the potential for cosmic citizenship. What we do with these gifts is up to us, but one thing is certain: we can never again claim ignorance of our true nature and cosmic responsibility. The story that began in the stars continues on Earth, and it will only end when humanity decides its own fate among the stars. The Anunnaki legacy lives on in every human being who chooses to reach for their highest potential and contribute to the ongoing evolution of consciousness in the universe. This has been Ancient Echo. Until our next journey into the forgotten chapters of human history, remember that the past is never truly past. It lives on in the world we create today and the future we choose tomorrow. The gods are not coming back. They never left. They live on in us, and we must decide what to do with their legacy.